Hello and welcome to Hammer Time, a Hammer horror podcast, part of the Evolution of Horror Network. I'm Becky Darke, a film critic and Hammer newbie, and I'm joined by my co-host, human encyclopedia of film and TV, and Hammer superfan, Kevin Lyons. Hi, Kev.
Hi, Becky.
In this podcast, Kevin and I are watching and discussing every horror film in Hammer's back catalogue. And this week, we're hanging out with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1959.
Know then the legend of the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Our Hammer Time discussions are all spoilerific, and we go into plot details and chat about the endings of the films. So if you haven't seen The Hound of the Baskervilles yet and would like to watch it before you listen to the episode, it's currently available to rent or buy on Prime Video. Or if you go onto a site like Just Watch, you'll be able to find where it's available near you. Kev, this is nice. We've had a couple of weeks off.
We have. It's very strange in the world of podcasting, isn't it, that we've had a couple of weeks off, but the podcast continues on its mighty way.
Exactly.
So people listening will have no idea that we had a couple of weeks off. I quite like that. It's kind of odd. It's I like it.
Our listeners are getting a bit of a peek behind the curtain. So we sort of bank our episodes a little bit, not very far in advance, but a couple of weeks in advance, just, for contingency's sake, I think, in case, an emergency should befall or, the imminent nuclear strike should occur.
No, don't you start that as well. Don't you start that as well. I freaked out enough people by suggesting that. So no, let's not.
No, I kid. But it's meant that we've had a couple of weeks off, even though the podcast has obviously been going into everybody's ears each week. But I must say, I've missed it. I missed watching the films, and I've missed chatting to you. So I'm very happy to be back.
Me too. Do you know what? We're very, very young into this whole process. It's very early days. And the other day I was actually thinking, I'm going to miss this when it finishes.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm going to be so sad when this ends. Don't worry, we are a year away from finishing at this point. But it's just the way I work, I'm afraid. I sort of think so far ahead. And I think, oh, no, what am I going to do? It's like, well, let's get through this year first.
Calm down, Lyons. Come on, stop.
Let's see if I can get through this year without Becky killing me at some point for being too nerdy.
No, come off it. It's my favourite thing.
There's no guarantees.
So, as I suggested in our intro, we are talking about Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes this week.
We are.
So this is Hammer tackling another big property. Okay, so we've done Frankenstein and Dracula, so Hammer had obviously sort of successfully adapted two of the most famous horror and sci-fi novels of all time, and now they're turning their sights to Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories.
Yes.
So, Kev, what was the kind of catalyst for this film?
Well, before I tell you that, it just struck me that you were warning that we're going to be spoilerific. I wonder if this is one of those films, one of those stories that's kind of spoiler proof, because even more so I think than Dracula and Frankenstein, people are very familiar with The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
There have been so many versions of it on film and TV that there's probably nothing left to say about it. When Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss did it for their Sherlock series, they had to completely change the whole thing just to maintain some sort of suspense and surprise. And so I wonder, we are going to spoil the ending in this, but I suspect 99% of people listening will be rolling their eyes now saying, oh, for God's sake, we already know how this ends.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well,
very fair.
How did it come about? Well, it came about in a slightly strange way. I've mentioned Elliot Hyman before. He was one of Hammer's key associates in the States. And his son Kenneth was offered the chance, the lucky bugger, to come to the UK to work with Hammer. And he was made that offer by no less than James Carreras himself, the managing director. Yeah, and he, Kenneth thought it might look better if he turned up at Bray Studios with an idea or two to suggest. to show a little bit of willing, a bit of keenness.
Yeah, I love that.
So he negotiated independently. He negotiated the rights to Hound of the Baskervilles from the Arthur Conan Doyle estate, arranged partial funding for United Artists, and then pitched the idea to Carreras on arrival. And Carreras, obviously, it was a no-brainer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dracula, Frankenstein, where do we go next? What are the great horror novels? Hound of the Baskervilles, we're in. Definitely. So Kenneth Hyman gets a producer credit on the American prints, but not on the British prints. So, but it's a no-brainer, wasn't it? I mean, why would they not want to do Hound of the Baskervilles? And to do it as a horror film.
Yeah.
There have been dozens of versions prior to this, and it was... The most famous one was the Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce one, which was actually done by 20th Century Fox, not Universal. 20th Century Fox did the first two of the Rathbone Holmes films, Hound of the Baskervilles and The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, before it went off to Universal. But, curiously, the 20th Century Fox Hound was the first proper attempt to do it as a gothic horror film.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Because that is definitely something that comes across in the Hammer version, very much so. It's got really,
very much
distinctive gothic tones.
I think at this point, because it was such a familiar story, this was the only sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
Was to play it up as a horror film.
But you're saying that there was sort of gothic tones in some of the earlier versions as well. So is that something that sort of comes along with Hound of the Baskervilles as a story in general?
I think so. I mean, you've got these sort of foggy moors, you've got the Grimp and Mire sucking ponies to their death and sort of the occasional humans. You've got a gigantic hound that howls in the night.
Yeah.
And a ruined church up on the crag.
Yeah.
I mean, it ticks all the gothic boxes as a story.
It does.
So yeah, I mean, you can see now the eyes lighting up at Bray Studios when Hyman turned up and said, "Should we do the Hound of the Baskervilles?" They were thinking, "Of course, we're going to do the Hound of the Baskervilles. It's perfect for us at the moment."
Yeah, like you say, no brainer. And the fact that he turned up with the rights already negotiated as well. I mean, they'd have bitten his hand off.
Oh, it would have been the icing on the cake, wouldn't it? I mean, they'd have done it anyway. I think if it had turned up and said, "I think we can get the rights," they'd have gone for it anyway. But the fact that he turned up with the rights in hand and with partial funding in place for the American distribution deal, absolutely. Why? I mean, they'd have been insane to have said no, and they were very far from insane.
Are you a Sherlock Holmes fan in general, Kev?
Oh yes, I have somewhere a very tatty collected edition of the stories. I need to replace it because honestly, I think half the pages are now missing or at least out of order. I love Sherlock Holmes. Absolutely adore Sherlock Holmes. I will watch any film or TV show with Sherlock Holmes in it. I've read loads of the pastiche books. I'm a Sherlock Holmes mega fan, yes.
Well, maybe when, we do eventually, inevitably get to the end of Hammer, we can do a Sherlock Holmes podcast.
Are you listening, Mike Muncer? Yes, let's do that.
Do you have a favourite Sherlock?
This is Peter Cushing, so I should say Peter Cushing, but it is Basil Rathbone.
Yeah, it kind of has to be.
It has to be. With Peter Cushing right on his heels.
Yeah, that's
right
fair.
On his heels. But Basil Rathbone was the first Sherlock Holmes I saw on screen. And there is something... I'm working my way through them at the moment because I think this time of year, like I say, to get to very autumnal, Christmas approaching, it's a great time to be watching mystery and horror films. And I'm working my way through the Universal series at the moment and loving every single second of it.
My mum was a huge fan. And I think Basil Rathbone was her favourite as well. So it was something that I kind of grew up with. My mum had them on VHS and then DVD. So they were always on. And, whenever they were on the telly, it would be like, oh, I love this one. Let's pop this on Sunday afternoon. And so I've always been, kind of familiar with it since I was a kid because my mum was obsessed with anything kind of detectives. So from everything
Brilliant.
like Sherlock Holmes, then like the Agatha Christie's, like She loved Miss Marple. She loved Poirot. And then
I'm beginning to see where you get it from.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
And then like right up to the kind of much more modern stuff. So, Prime Suspect and Waking the Dead and Inspector Frost and stuff. Basically, if it had a detective in it, she loved it.
But don't we all love a detective story?
We absolutely do. And
we like to be in the position, don't we, of the detective to see if we can work it out. It's why I never warmed to Columbo, because we knew who did it at the beginning of Columbo, and I like the idea of not knowing who did it and trying to be one step ahead of the detectives.
Yeah.
That's what I like about a detective story. It exercises the brain and the imagination a little bit, where you try and work out who did it and why.
Yeah, definitely. And the best detective stories, and I guess especially adaptations to a certain extent, kind of drip feed you the clues.
Yes.
And let you kind of try to piece it together, as you say, Kev, sort of almost one step ahead of the detectives that you're watching. But at the same time, they never give you quite enough that you're too far ahead of it, because a bit like the Columbo thing, then it takes the fun out of it if it's too easy.
It is,
so it's actually, a really successful story, detective story really kind of treads that balance, doesn't it, between giving you enough so that you can play along,
exactly,
but not giving you too much that it kind of spoils the ending. You always still want that kind of classic Poirot-esque sort of denouement where you've got everybody gathered together and,
That's it, yeah. Well, I can remember seeing the Basil Rathbone Hound of the Baskervilles for the first time and being slightly mystified by the whole business with the missing shoe, which, of course, is a vital part of the story and replicated here very faithfully. And then that wonderful moment when you realise why the shoe is missing.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about these kind of mysteries and detective films, is you get that little sort of rush, don't you? That's why they took the shoe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. I love all that. I really do. It's wonderful.
It's something that I think the Hammer film has really captured, is this kind of multi-layered story where you've got these bits and pieces kind of sprinkled throughout. So it might be the shoe, it might be the tarantula. We'll come on to talk about the tarantula.
Yeah.
It might be, the candles in the window and why they're there, all of this stuff. So while it has definitely leaned into the horror vibes of the story, it hasn't streamlined it too much so you're just watching a horror film. It still very much feels like a Sherlock Holmes detective story with all of those lovely little aspects, the little clues.
That's right,
and it really feeling like a jigsaw that you're trying to put together.
That's exactly it. It's a jigsaw, isn't it? Because you've got all these bits that don't seem to go together.
Yeah.
Why is that candle in the window? What's the escaped prisoner got to do with anything?
Exactly.
And then it all, just like you said, like a jigsaw, all the pieces are put into place and suddenly it all makes perfect sense.
So, the plot of the movie, as always, from Letterboxd. This is a short one from Letterboxd, but as you say, Kev, it's such a familiar story anyway. And I think this is pretty well put together and succinct. Tells us what we need to know. When a nobleman is threatened by a family curse on his newly inherited estate, Detective Sherlock Holmes is hired to investigate. Simple as that.
Perfect. And that's part of its joy, isn't it? It's the simplicity of it. Yeah. There are sort of levels to it, but the basic plot is really simple.
Yeah.
And that was Conan Doyle's genius. He would take a very simple plot and then embellish that with all these little flourishes and levels and layers and so on. But the plot itself was always very simple. Absolutely.
You've got this kind of aristocratic line.
Yep.
There is a rumoured curse, but what actually is happening is the lords do keep dying in sort of slightly suspicious circumstances.
Yes.
You've got, Britain's greatest detective, and he's on the case. And then, as you say, you kind of add in these extra bits, the missing shoe, the escaped convict, you know, the kind of relationship with the other people who sort of like live on and around the land. And so it kind of builds it all out. But really, it's just, you know, these people keep dying. It seems to potentially be linked to a family curse.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what's going on.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And then, you know, in some ways, I think Conan Doyle had the problem that Sherlock Holmes was so clever that if the plot was too simple, it'd be over by the end of the first page.
Yeah.
Because Holmes could just look at it and go, that's what happened.
Well, you sometimes get that with Sherlock Holmes, don't you? So it might, a story might start with a case being presented to him, and you think like, oh, this is going to be the case of the story.
Yeah.
But it's not, because he sort of looks at it for 30 seconds, if that, solves it, sort of shoos that person away, and it's like, okay, right, we've got that one out of the way. Now what's the actual story we're going to tell? And
the character is so clever, and it's sort of the legacy of him is so pervasive that when I went to university, my plan was to study offender profiling, as it was called back then, which is the whole sort of, you know, manhunter thing, you know, sort of. I was doing psychology. I was going to be Will Graham, basically, from Manhunter, and I was going to track down serial killers. And unfortunately, they dropped the course because there was only me and one other person interested in it.
Oh, that's such a shame.
The little bit we did learn from it, the name Sherlock Holmes came up a lot, because a lot of the techniques that they use to do this stuff was in the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Yeah.
Holmes' innate understanding of human behaviour. He's a very cold and distant person,
he is,
but he understands human nature better than any other fictional character, I think.
Yeah.
So, you know, his name kept cropping up all the time in those circles, because he was like, yeah, you know, he's Sherlock Holmes. He is the best of us.
That's really fascinating. I love the fact that he's so well drawn and written as a character, and you know that his kind of approach to detective work, and as you say, to literally, like, you know, just reading the human condition and picking out the clues that those of us who aren't looking hard enough miss. I mean, he literally says in this film, you know, all I need to do is use my eyes. You know, that's
right.
He's literally like, well, I just kind of see what's in front of me. There's nothing remarkable about that.
I honestly, when I go through these periodic every few years reading all the stories again, by about the third or fourth one, I've got my deer stalker on, my cape, and I'm going out and just observing things, because that's all it is. He's just the most observant man that ever or never existed.
Yeah.
He just looks at things, whereas most of us just bumble through the day without knowing what's going on around us at all.
Oh my God. I mean, I feel like I've just got my eyes shut half the time. Some of the stuff...
Oh, absolutely.
My husband's much more observant than I am.
Right, yeah.
And in some ways I envy him for it, and in some ways I don't, because he gets very cross because he's noticing all this stuff all the time. And I'm like, I'm sort of in blissful ignorance, just kind of skipping through life,
honestly,
completely unaware of what's going on.
People think I'm making this up, but this is absolutely true. I used to go out, when I used to go out for walks to places or whatever, going to work, I always had my Walkman on. And there was one day I went out for a walk and I suddenly woke up and I thought, where the hell am I? I was that busy listening to my music that I wasn't paying any attention to where I was or where I was going. I was just bumbling along. It's a nice day. Let's go for a bit of exercise, bit of a walk. Hang on, where am I? You know, and that's pretty much what I'm like. I've had people walk up to me in the street and stand right in front of me who have been friends for many years, shouting in my face, "Hello, Kev." And I'm like, what?
That sort of thing happens to me. People will be like, oh, like, I saw you the other day and I was waving at you and I shouted your name. And I'm like, oh, God, I absolutely no clue.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. I'm just a daydreamer. I just wander about in a daze the whole time. I'm always thinking about something else. I'm going to get killed out there one day. I'm really going to get run over by something. So.
So, is this a faithful adaptation of the Doyle story, Kev? You mentioned just now that obviously they've got the shoe, and you sort of said, that's been recreated very faithfully to how it does in the novel. But in general, is this a faithful adaptation, and does that matter really?
I think it's faithful in the same way that Hammer's Frankenstein and Dracula adaptations weren't. Okay. They take the basic idea, but then they do their own thing with it. And I think that's quite right. I'm not one of those who's overly precious about adaptations. There are a couple which drive me mad because they display no understanding of the source material. I'm thinking of, and it pains me to say, David Lynch's Dune.
Okay, yeah.
The ending of that is just so counter to what goes on in the books that it just drove me mad. And the version,
I don't think you're alone with that one, Kev.
No. The version of Watchmen, which was like 90% accurate, and then I'm not going to spoil anything if you've not read the comic, but there is the most iconic double-page spread in comic book history, which they completely get rid of and change it into something much more mundane.
Yes.
And things like that, when they don't understand or they don't appear to understand the source material, drive me mad. Things like this, I think Hammer completely understood the source material, but they thought, we're going to do it our way.
Yeah.
This isn't Conan Doyle's Hound of the Baskervilles. This is Hammer's Hound of the Baskervilles.
Absolutely.
So we'll keep what we need to keep, but we're not going to be afraid to make changes. Now, the purists out there, they will say, oh, no, it's terrible. There's no tarantula in Doyle. We're going to talk about this tarantula, but there's no tarantula in Doyle, all the rest of it. And, yeah, I understand what they're saying, but honestly, I don't think it matters that much because they're still telling the same basic story. They're just doing it in their own way, as they should. If they did completely faithful adaptations of these films, there wouldn't have been any more of these films made since the 1930s, because what would be the point?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
They have to, every adaptation of everything, right up until, last week's Guillermo del Toro Frankenstein, have to bring their own things to it.
That's it.
Otherwise, we're just sitting there thinking, I saw this 20, 30, 40 years ago.
That's it. And, humans have been telling stories since we were round the campfire, outside of our caves, basically. And there are myths and folk tales and stories that have come down through the ages. And you're not telling me that stories that are thousands of years old are still being told in exactly the same way as they were being told then.
Absolutely
you
not.
need to adapt and tell it in a way that either makes it more relevant to the person that you're telling it to, or the time that you're telling it in. This is a reason why I sort of think like remakes and things like that don't really bother me. Like, I used to get really wound up about it when I was a kind of burgeoning film fan and, very sort of purist about these things and finger waggy about it. But I just think that's such a silly way to be. And I've really softened about it because there are different ways to tell the same story. And that doesn't mean that, the story in a different form or with a different style or with a different ending or focus is kind of any less relevant. It's just a different way of telling it.
I mean, one of the great fundamental texts of Western society, whether we buy into it or not, is the Bible, which I believe has been rewritten at least twice. So, I mean, this is one of the great defining fundamental texts of Western morality and all the rest of it. It's been retold and and it's like, you're right, stories do get retold. Myths and legends become myths and legends because they're retold, because they become fuzzy around the edges. What we're seeing with these things are kind of modern folklore, modern folk tales, and they're being retold around the campfire. There's a different group of cavemen telling the Hound of the Baskervilles story.
Right.
No disrespect to Hammer, I'm not saying they're cavemen, honestly. There's nothing wrong with cavemen anyway. They were terrific, misunderstood species anyway. But, dig that hole, Kev, dig that hole. But
it's the saber-toothed tiger of the Baskervilles, though, when it's...
It is, isn't it? That would be a film, wouldn't it?
Yeah, wouldn't it?
If you want to remake it with Neanderthals and do it with, I say Neanderthals, if my niece, who studies these at degree level, is listening to this, she'll be going, there were no saber-toothed tigers with Neanderthals. I don't think there were saber-toothed tigers anyway. I think they may have been an invention. But it would make a great film.
Exactly. Never let a fact get in the way of a great story, Kev.
Well, to be fair, we live in a world where that has become the catchphrase, isn't it? Never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So, why not? Go on, make your own versions of Hound of the Baskervilles. I reserve the right not to like them, but I reserve the right to watch them, to see you do them and do something special.
Absolutely.
Not all of them work. I think the Hammer one, it's not faithful, particularly, but it is great. It's a really good adaptation of the story because it understands the source material, and that's key. So
you're a fan of this one, Kev? Is this one of your faves?
It is one of my faves. I don't think it's... We'll come to this at the end, but I don't think it's quite up there with Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein, but very few films are, to be fair. But this is a really good version of the story. And there are many reasons why that is, which we'll touch on, not least of which is the cast, of course.
I also really enjoyed it. This was the first time that I've seen this one.
Oh, which, okay.
Yeah, I'm very happy to say I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good time and a really well-told Sherlock Holmes story with, as you say, this unmistakable Hammer flair.
Yes, exactly. They've taken the story and they've just layered it quite thick with Hammerisms. And how could you not love it?
Absolutely.
How could you not love it?
Absolutely. So you said just then, Kev, that one of the key reasons that it is a successful film is obviously the cast. And so we've got Holmes and Watson, who are such famous characters anyway. Yep. So what do we think of these embodiments of Holmes and Watson, played by Peter Cushing and Andre Morel? They're
terrific. They really are. Peter Cushing, of course, was going to go on to play Holmes on television, on the BBC. And he was a huge fan of the stories, in fact. He owned a full set of the Strand magazines that featured the original stories.
Oh, wow.
And he acted as a kind of unofficial advisor on the set, sort of like, no, Holmes would do this, Holmes wouldn't do that sort of thing.
That's cool.
That was just great. And, he loves Sherlock Holmes. And I think you can see that because he inhabits this character even more so than I think Van Helsing or Frankenstein. He inhabits those completely. It's almost like Peter Cushing disappears here.
Yeah.
He becomes Sherlock Holmes because I think he's just so in love with this character. And I think, Basil Rathbone will always be my favourite, but I think, like I say, Peter Cushing is right on his heels, breathing down his neck. And he takes the opportunity to do some terrific prop work. I mentioned before that he was known as Props Cushing or Props Peter. Go back and watch the scene where he first interviews Dr. Mortimer in the flat at 221B Baker Street, and he's wandering around the set straightening pictures and picking up papers and all the rest of it.
And there's a bit where he lights his pipe with a lump of coal from the fire.
That's right, from the fire.
Which I love.
Stuff. And what's great about it is it doesn't distract you from the story. You only become aware of it when you start looking for it.
Yeah, that's
when you know
right.
This was what Cushing was good at. It just makes the character feel more real. The fact that he sort of goes over, I think he mutters to somebody, doesn't excuse me, as he goes across the room to straighten the painting on the wall. And it's like, yes, Holmes would do that because Holmes would have observed that this painting was slightly skew-if, and he would not like that. He likes his order, and he likes everything to be in its place. But the fact that, I suspect that's not in the script. I suspect that is just Peter Cushing thinking.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Before the camera rolled, he would have gone over and just nudged that painting to be slightly off-centre, and then, go and put that back, because I can bring the character more to life by doing props work than almost anything else. That would have been his reasoning, I think.
Or even if it was just slightly off-centre anyway, he didn't nudge it. I think it's highly possible that he would have just, been in the middle of his lines. He'll have clocked it. He'll have come up with that idea on the spot.
Oh,
he'll have got it. He'll have sort of said, excuse me. He'll have gone and straightened it. But at no point does that feel that it's kind of breaking the fourth wall or anything. It feels so organic and like it would have been in the script, or even beyond that you're just watching Sherlock Holmes be Sherlock Holmes.
Exactly. It doesn't feel contrived, does it?
No, not at all.
It doesn't feel like, oh, it's an affectation, I must do this because this is my thing. It just feels, like you say, like it's Sherlock Holmes being Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
What a performance. And he's matched, step for step, in my book, by Andre Morel. Mm-hmm. Who's playing Watson, and he wanted very consciously to get away from that Nigel Bruce image of Watson. I love Nigel Bruce, but Nigel Bruce kind of set this idea in people's head that Watson was a bit of a bumbler, and he's not.
No, of course
he's not. In the stories at all.
He's a doctor. He's a military doctor, you know.
Absolutely. He's a very smart man. He's not quite as smart as Sherlock Holmes, because no one is, but he's a valuable assistant and friend and comrade to Holmes, whereas Nigel Bruce was kind of the comic relief. And Andre Morel really wanted to get away from that. And the way he plays him here, I think he's more intelligent, he's more human, and he's a really good foil to the iciness of Holmes, which Peter Cushing catches rather well. You know, that slightly aloof, slightly sort of, I'm operating on a level way above you lot. Whereas Morel is much more warm and much more approachable. If you saw them in the street, you'd rush up and shake hands with Dr. Watson first, and you'd be quite terrified of Sherlock Holmes, because he's quite icy. And they work brilliantly together. And I have to put in a plug for a non-Hammer horror, because I believe this episode is going out in December, so this is a good time to plug this. They work together again on a terrific Hammer film called Cash on Demand, which is set at Christmas. And Andre Morel plays this very smart, very urbane, very suave wannabe bank robber. Mm-hmm. And Peter Cushing is the bank manager, who, I'm not going to give too much away, but it's a variation on the heist film, but it's not a heist film, if that makes sense. It's just brilliant. And it's just these two actors just bouncing off each other in the same way I think they do here. It's a lovely relationship here. It's a more fractious one in Cash on Demand. But this, I believe that these two men share a flat.
Yeah, oh, absolutely that. I completely agree.
I believe they could be flatmates without killing each other. I think Basil Rathbone would have killed Nigel Bruce after a few weeks. But this one, I think they're almost equals, and that kind of resets the balance a little bit in the sort of depiction of Watson.
Yeah, agreed.
Which I'm very much in favour of. Two terrific performances there.
I agree. You've mentioned Cash on Demand before, and I think at the time I said, it sounds like The Silent Partner.
Yes, that's right.
And I think this Christmas, because I've seen The Silent Partner, obviously, because I'm an enormous Elliot Gould fan.
Of course, yes.
And I've never seen Cash on Demand. And so this year, around Christmas, I'm going to double bill them. I'm going to treat myself to a little double bill of those two films.
It's become a tradition in the Lyons household, such as it is, that at Christmas Eve, there's always a version of Christmas Carol, usually, to be fair, the Alistair Sim one. There's always Cash on Demand, and there's always Die Hard.
Yes,
They're my three Christmas Eve films. So, you know, I can't wait. I've just spent the whole year waiting for Christmas Eve to come back round, because I want to watch these films again. Yeah. And I'm trying to be sort of good and not watch them, you know, in the middle of summer or anything.
I love that. So we've got Terence Fisher in the director's chair, and we've got Jack Asher's cinematography again. And as we've already kind of alluded to, we get here a Sherlock Holmes film with a really distinctive kind of gothic style, gothic aesthetic. As you've said, Kev, you know, the Hound of the Baskervilles story kind of really lends itself to that anyway, with a lot of its kind of settings and you know, obviously the howling of the hound and the stormy, misty moors and but I think obviously with this being a Hammer adaptation and with Terence Fisher's direction and Jack Asher's cinematography, this is like a really kind of perfect demonstration of kind of the gothic in this story anyway. So what are the what's Hammer and the kind of filmmakers doing here to like really like ramp up the Gothic and put that Hammer stamp on this already famous story?
Well, the first thing is, and I stand ready to be corrected, but I believe I'm right in saying this was the first Sherlock Holmes film in colour.
Ooh.
What colour it is. Just look at that opening sequence with those blood red jackets on the toffs. Those awful, horrible men in the first scene got wearing these...
They are so
They're repulsive,
hideous.
aren't they, those men? They are awful, awful men. And they're dressed in blood red. Mm-hmm. And it leaps out the screen at you.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, whoa, yeah. There was the thing going around, there was a review when Suspiria opened, the original Argento Suspiria, that you could develop film in the front row of the cinema because of the red that bleeds out of the screen. And,
oh my God, I love that.
And it's a great comment, isn't it? But I think these must have had the same sort of effect when you saw it on the big screen, to see those bright, vibrant colours, which then contrast very nicely with the dank moors.
Yeah.
You know, all built at Bray Studios, incidentally. I tell a lie. Frensham Ponds is where they actually shot most of it, in Surrey. There was
You're joking?
No, there was a second unit went to Dartmoor to do some establishing shots, but that was it. Mostly it was at Frensham Ponds, and there was a little bit of work done at the back lot of Bray as well.
Kev,
but you'd never know.
I must stop you. Frensham Ponds. I grew up just down the road from there, and Frensham Ponds was like bundle up Becky in, you know, all of her little sort of parka and, you know, her little mittens on strings and stuff, get her wellies on. We're going to Frensham Ponds, and my parents used to take me to Frensham Ponds, and there's Frensham Big Ponds and Frensham Little Ponds, and you would go for a walk, and it's all kind of like sort of sandy soil, and so there's lots of kind of bracken and like sort of rotting logs, and you can see sort of wildlife. And I remember I saw my first ever slow worm at Frensham Ponds. And then when I became a teenager, we weren't going wildlife spotting anymore, obviously. We were going up there to have a bit of
we get it.
Well, I was going to say drink and a smoke, actually, Kev, before your mind gets in the gutter. Thank you very much.
My mind is rarely out of the gutter, if I'm honest.
But, you know, then it sort of became, you know, teenage hangout, especially when we could all drive. So you would drive up to Frensham Ponds, and you would hang out up there. Obviously not drinking and driving, obviously. There would always be a designated driver. And then in the year that we had the big total eclipse, which would have been 99, I want to say 98, 99.
It would have been 99, yes, that's right. Yes.
That was where all of my friends and I went up to go and see the total eclipse with our little eclipse glasses and stuff. Frensham Ponds is like, it holds such a special place in my heart as just somewhere that I've just always known and spent a lot of times and always absolutely loved. And I had no idea that this was filmed there. And so now I think I love this film even more because it's got that lovely connection.
Well, that's lovely. Actually, it's time, for a Hammer pilgrimage back to Frensham Ponds.
Honestly, Kev, it is so nice. Let's do it.
we should organise a Hammer Time day out.
Yeah, we're going to go
to Frensham Ponds. We got another one. We can go to Black Park because we're going to see a lot of Black Park in future films as we go.
And we're going to go to Kensington Gore.
Yeah, we should do it. Let's come on, sign up now. So you know.
And we're going to go to Whitstable and go and visit the Peter Cushing pub.
Yes, I've never been, and I always wanted to go. So let's do it. Let's do it as the Hammer Time family. Let's go.
I love it. Let's do it.
But anyway, yes, it was Frensham Ponds. Is mostly where
that is amazing.
Is happening. Look, the bog is on the back lot, I believe, of Bray Studios, and there's one or two shots. I think you can tell what they are with like the crags and everything. They're the ones that were done by the second unit, who just went off there for a day or two and just filmed footage to just edit into the film to give it that kind of slightly more windswept look.
Yeah.
So, yes, I don't quite know how we got onto all of this, but there you go. Oh, yes, we were talking about the dank moors, weren't we? And Grimpen Mire.
Yes, we were. And the contrast to
the colour.
The kind of vibrant colours, yeah.
Yeah, so you get this sort of lovely interior work, and everybody in their lovely costumes and everything. And then this very grim exterior world, full of danger, full of, sort of bogs that will pull you down to your death, and giant hounds, and, sort of treacherous landscapes and possible serial killers on the loose. And then you go back inside and it's all very cosy and lovely and colourful. And I love that. That's beautifully done.
So Christopher Lee. Let's talk about the wonderful Christopher Lee as Sir Henry Baskerville. So he has such a wonderful aristocratic vibe as an actor anyway.
Yes.
He brought that obviously to Dracula, and what we get here is a much more kind of mortal, natural, I suppose, aristocrat, but with no less of that kind of sort of very grand, and he's got like a sort of authority and a stillness to him, and he looks fabulous. He's got lots of tweed on in this, and he cuts again as he always does, that very striking figure, very sort of upright, and I just thought he was absolutely marvellous in this film as Sir Henry.
Would you like a moment alone with your Christopher Lee thoughts? I mean, I know you adore this man so
and
much.
The trouble is, Kev, every week that goes by, I adore him more and more. By the time we get to the end, I'm going to be like fully obsessed.
Well, that's not a bad thing, to be fair. If you're going to be obsessed with anybody, be obsessed with either Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing. But he is great in this, and I think. When I said, Kenneth Hyman turned up at Bray Studios and said, let's do Hound of the Baskervilles, and a light bulb went on. And I think one of the first light bulbs that went on was Sir Henry will get Christopher Lee to do it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect casting. Yeah. He's at the beginning of the film, he's quite haughty in that aristocratic way. He does tend to look down his nose at people. And that's all part of being very tall. He can do that. He can actually look down at people slightly disdainfully, which he does at the beginning. There's that lovely moment where we first meet him, where he mistakes Holmes and Watson for the hotel employees.
That's right.
And embarrasses himself. And he's a bit sort of like, oh, yeah, sorry, and he's not quite as haughty as he wants us to believe. He softens considerably as the film goes along.
Yeah, he does.
If he'd stayed the same as when we first met him, we'd have been praying for the Hound to get him.
Absolutely.
He does. He softens up and he becomes a very likeable, as far as aristocrats go, he becomes a very likeable character.
Yeah.
He appears very brusque and, when you first meet him, but actually a really decent chap. Just beneath that frosty exterior. Some might say maybe a little bit like Christopher Lee himself, who could be quite imposing when you first meet him. But no, he was a lovely chap. And, that aristocratic bearing can be quite intimidating, I think. Especially if you're a lowly working class pleb like me, you don't know whether to tug your forelock or sort of make them a drink and serve it or something. But there was none of that with Lee, and I think in Sir Henry Baskerville, that's a bit of an act.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
He's been out the country all this time, and I think this is what he thinks British aristocrats should be like.
Well, especially, we'll come on to talk a little about this in a little more detail with Sir Hugo. And as we've already sort of mentioned. He's at the beginning of the film, he's got, the hunting coat on, that sort of red. He's hanging out in the house, in the sort of, his big house, with all of his hunting buddies being horrendous. He is the guy who kind of brings this supposed curse upon the Baskerville line. And I think that you really need to distinguish Sir Henry from Sir Hugo. Indeed, because the whole point, obviously, of the kind of main part of the story is that Sherlock Holmes and Watson are trying to protect this man from what appears to be a kind of inevitable death, right? This thing that is kind of looming over him for the whole of the film. And if he was another Sir Hugo, you're not going to feel any sympathy for him at all. And as you say, Kev, you're almost waiting for, the Hound to kind of tear him to shreds. You need to distinguish him from his ancestors to be able to kind of have that empathy for the character.
Of course, you're absolutely spot on right, yeah. So we can see him initially as just another aristocrat, which may have been a little sleight of hand.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, he's no better than his predecessor. He's like, he's horrible, man. He's not. He's actually really nice. He's really charming. When he gets to Baskerville Hall and you see him interacting with other people, the lower classes, he doesn't get the riding crop out and start beating them. He's actually quite respectful of the lower orders.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
You grow to quite like this guy very quickly in this film. And a lot of that is down to Lee's magnificent performance, as ever. And isn't it nice, just as an aside, to see him in a Hammer film playing a good guy?
It really is. It's really nice.
I mean, the monster was misunderstood, but he was still murderous.
Yeah.
The Frankenstein monster. Dracula was just a monster.
Yeah.
And here we have him as a proper good guy. And
it's great. And you're right in terms of the way that he interacts with his kind of staff and the vicar and people like that. When I think it's Mrs. Barrymore comes over a bit of a tizzy.
Yes.
He doesn't sort of roll his eyes or tell her off for breaking the glass when she drops it. He's sort of concerned. He's like, yes, she must have had quite a shock. And then with the hilarious vicar who comes round, when he's sort of asking for stuff for the jumble sale, I absolutely love that this man is so posh that he doesn't even know what a jumble sale is.
That's right.
Hilarious.
Yes. It's wonderful.
But even then, it's that this idea of him sort of donating some stuff, some clothes or whatever. He's like, yeah, sure, we'll dig something out. Like, he's just very kind of affable. I think that's important. And as you say, very well sold by Lee. And
I think he's learned that from being in America, away from the aristocracy over here. He's learned to be a better person, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is a lot in that bit with the vicar. We'll talk about the vicar because he's an important actor. But there's a lovely moment when he's talking about the clothes where there's a little smile plays across Christopher Lee's face. Now, I've never been able to work out, is that a good bit of acting? Very possibly. Or is he just smiling because Miles Malleson is so great?
I know.
And I can't work out, is that like an involuntary smile because this is just so funny?
It could be
Or is it just a lovely bit of acting on his part? It could be either. I will buy whichever one people prefer to go with. It's lovely. It's a terrific little moment.
So, great. Let's come on to talk about some of the rest of this cast of brilliant characters and performers. Who should we start with? Should we talk about Miles Malleson as Bishop Frankland? I'm so sorry, Bishop Frankland. I was calling you a vicar a moment ago. How insolent of me. He is a bishop.
He is. He's terrific, isn't he? Isn't he wonderful? By this point, Hammer had their pick of British character actors. They were hugely successful already. They were a known brand by this point. These actors were queuing up to be in a Hammer film because they knew that it was going to be a big deal. They were going to get seen. They were going to get good notices.
I love that.
But they managed to find terrific people, and Miles Malleson turns up a lot in Hammer, and whatever he turns up in, my day gets better when I see Miles Malleson. He is wonderful in this. In some ways, it kind of feels like this is the Nigel Bruce character.
Right, yeah.
Slightly bumbling, slightly sort of like, sort of living in his own little world, his own little dream world. And he gets an absolutely terrific bit of business with a telescope.
When he breaks that window, I was howling.
He's just so funny in it. It's just the way he's got this childlike enthusiasm. He doesn't care the window's broken. He's just like, I love him. He's great. He's just so good. And you needed that in a film that was as dark and as grim as this. And, you know, quite often the comic relief comes on and you roll your eyes, you think, oh, for God's sake, come on. You know, let's get back to the action. Here, I'm like, no, don't worry about the dog. Let's see more of Bishop Franklin, because he is so good. And it's such a lovely performance. He appears to be wearing something that only just recently died on his head. Miles Malleson has a bit of a history of not wearing the best wigs. In fact, it's become, over on the Hammer Lovers, the Facebook group, it's become a bit of a thing. Jonathan Rigby has threatened to write this book for years called Hammer the Wigs, because, you know, everybody in these films is wearing a wig, and some of them are magnificent, you can't tell, and some of them it's like,
some of them are better than others.
Yeah, it's like, why have you got a hamster balanced on the top of your head there, Miles? It's like, what are you trying to do here? But that's all part of the magic, and it's part of the character. I can kind of imagine this character having a wig that doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
You know, because he's just kind of, that's the guy he is. It's a beautiful performance and very, very, very funny.
Very funny. There's an incredible line delivery from him when we first meet him. And in fact, when he first meets Watson and he says, I knew a Watson in Geneva. Notorious white slaver. Nice fellow, though.
Right. Isn't that brilliant? I just the look on Andre Morell's face where Watson can't quite work out what he's meant to say to that.
I know. Notorious white slaver. Nice fellow, though. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, it reminds me of that scene of, there's a famous story of, it's Nancy Mitford, wasn't it, who was the British socialite who befriended Hitler. And she apparently said once at a party, you never met Hitler, did you? Oh, he had the most beautiful blue eyes. Yeah, that's what we remember about Hitler. Yeah, that's what we focus on. And this feels like the same kind of delivery. Like, yes, he was a white slaver, but he was all right, he was a nice bloke. But no, Bishop, he wasn't a nice bloke at all. He was horrible. Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. The reaction from Andre Morell is just spot on to it. It's perfect, like he looks the way the members in the audience are looking in reaction to that line.
Did you just say that?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean by that? Yeah, beautiful. And, you know, this, again,
funny.
I could go on about this forever, but this is what is brilliant about Hammer and their casting, that they picked veteran actors who'd been around for a while, who could do that sort of thing, who could deliver lines like that, who could react to lines like that, and didn't need to be as directed as maybe some of the younger cast members who were a bit more inexperienced. You know, I think Terence Fisher must have looked at these cast lists and rubbed his hands with glee and thought, excellent, this is going to be a good shoot. I've got all these people, I'll just say, go over there and deliver your lines, do what you like.
Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't. I'm sure he did more than that. But he probably could have done with actors of this calibre, yeah.
So elsewhere, we've got Francis de Wolfe as Dr. Mortimer. Now, I thought just to get this out of the way, I thought the performance was very good, excellent actor. But I need you to explain to me what Dr. Mortimer is all about, Kev, because if there was anything about this film that didn't quite work for me, I just didn't. I'm not sure if I missed something, but I didn't understand what this guy was up to, or kind of how he was involved, or was he involved in anything? Is he just a bit odd? Like, can you talk to me about Dr. Mortimer, please?
Henry Baskerville's dad's doctor. So he gets the story rolling because he'd been the one that, you know, sort of looked at the body, decided that, you know, he'd sort of died of a massive heart attack.
That's right.
Died of fear, essentially.
Yeah.
And he was the one that then comes along to Holmes and Watson with this fanciful story of a family curse, which Holmes doesn't buy for 1 second. Right from the start, he doesn't believe this is a curse. But Mortimer does, and it's kind of interesting that he's another doctor who buys into it, buys into the idea of the curse. And I think his role in the film, to be perfectly honest, as played brilliantly by Francis de Wolfe, who was a terrific actor, I think his role is as a red herring. Right,
okay, good. That is all I needed to know.
Yes.
Because that's what it felt like to me, and I was worried that I'd missed something. But if he's meant to be a red herring, then I'm good.
I think so, yeah. He's very intense.
Yeah.
Very intense, and I think we're meant to believe, one of the changes they've made is he's going to be the man behind the Hound.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course he isn't. They pull the rug right from under us, towards the end of the film. And yeah, so I think he's just meant to be there as a red herring, and I think Francis de Wolff plays him as a red herring.
I was absolutely on board. I was like, oh my God, this guy is a wrong and he is up to something.
yeah. And of course he turns out a completely innocent man. He's just a bit intense. We all know people like that. My God, you should have met me as a teenager. I'd have been hauled up for every crime committed. I was so bloody intense. I was just so uptight as a teenager, But, I think we all know people who are just a little bit serious about it. I remember once, sorry, I got off on a tangent. Remember once, it's about films, sitting in the student union, talking to a very nice young lady about films. She was a big film fan, and she made the terrible mistake of asking me what my favourite films were. And about, 3 hours later, she actually did say to me, said, God, you're so intense, aren't you? Never saw her again.
Oh.
But yeah, I think we go through phases like that ourselves. We know people who are like that. And he's playing that character.
There are definitely people who would call me intense about certain things.
Absolutely. And I think just Dr. Muncer is just more intense than everybody.
Yeah.
He's a very serious man.
Fine.
But he has this sort of slight... Maybe he's overcompensating. Maybe that's it, that he believes in the curse. So he's no better than the common, uneducated people.
Yeah.
But he's actually a doctor, a learned man, but he still believes in this curse. Maybe he's overcompensating a little bit.
Yeah. That would make sense. He sort of feels out of his... comfort zone almost, and he's sort of having to, especially up against somebody like Sherlock Holmes.
Sure, yeah,
because and with Dr. Watson as well. There's a moment when Sir Henry has a bit of a turn, right? He's has the thing out on the moor with his heart.
Yes.
And Dr. Mortimer actually calls Dr. Watson sort of to come and attend to him. And I think Watson says to him, like, why did you call me though? You could have handled this. So there is that feeling that maybe he's feeling a bit out of his depth.
I think he was the smartest man in Grimpen until Sherlock and Holmes turned up.
Right.
And then he's feeling a little bit, he went and got them, but I think now he feels a little bit sort of like, I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Yeah.
So he's overcompensating a little bit by being very serious and very intense. And I think, it's actually, the more you think about it, it's actually quite a nuanced performance, isn't it?
Genuinely, yeah.
There's a lot going on there.
I just felt like by the time I got to the end of the film, I was like, did I nod off at some point and like, have I missed something vital? But if he's meant to be a red herring, that all makes perfect sense and I'm happy.
The performance works for me if I believe that he's meant to be a red herring, that we're meant to believe that he's in on this conspiracy when he's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a little bit of sort of wrong-footing us, and I kind of like that. I like those games when filmmakers try to, pardon the pun here, put us off the scent.
Nice.
But I think I think it works really well as a performance if you accept that he's a red herring.
Good. Well, I'm glad we've cleared that up. I feel a lot better about the whole situation. Thank you. So elsewhere we have got the Stapletons. So we've got Ewan Solon.
Ewan Solon. I never know how to pronounce it. This is a conversation I have a lot when we're doing commentaries, that we often have these names in our heads for many years, decades even, and then we're expected to say them out loud.
I know.
There is a bit of a running gag in the commentaries I do with Jonathan Rigby about the pronunciation of a London railway station. Marylebone, Marylebone, Marylebone. We all say it completely different. And it's not a word I use on a daily basis, so I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to go. We'll go with either Ewan Solon or Ewan Solon, whichever he's best.
Great. Well, he plays Stapleton. And
he does.
Then we've got Marla Landy as his daughter Cecile. And there's I want to talk about her specifically a little bit more, and about the kind of exploitation of women like within the story of the film, because that is something that is actually sort of drives a lot of the plot and the action in the end.
He does, yeah.
But what do we think of the Stapletons in general? You've got a kind of father-daughter dynamic.
Yep.
Ewan Solon and Marla Landy. I thought they were both really good. And there's a lot of kind of, again, sort of interesting stuff here going on about these two sort of working together in this plot, because obviously it gets sort of revealed at the end that they are the sort of masterminds behind
that's right, yeah.
Henry, is it, who's the middle one? Is it Sir Charles?
It is, isn't it? Sir Charles the father, yes. Sir
Charles, yeah. So behind Sir Charles's death, and then obviously this plot against Henry as well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of all to do with illegitimate children, but then Cecile has got, she sort of pretends to have designs on Henry, and this whole thing about her being desperate to go back to Spain, but actually that appears to sort of be a bit of a line she's spinning just to kind of engender sympathy from him. And, so I think that there's some really interesting stuff going on with these two.
There is. And I think, we can make a case for Cecile being Hammer's first female villain in a Gothic. We'd had the vampires in Dracula, but honestly, they're more victims than anything else.
Right.
They're just acting on instincts. They couldn't help being who they were. They were the victims of Dracula, and they're just acting as vampires. Cecile is acting out of her own interests.
Yeah, absolutely.
And very cruelly, I think, because it's not poor Sir Henry's fault that any of this has happened, really, is it? So, but, I think, Marla Landy is terrific in the past.
Yeah, she is. She's great.
Really good. And she was actually Italian, not Spanish, but,
okay.
It brings that sort of Mediterranean exoticism.
Well, it does. Honestly, Kevin, the shot that we are introduced to Cecile, and she's on the moors, and it's such a different image that we've had, I think, from any of the women that we've encountered so far in Hammer Horror.
Definitely.
Because she is sat on a rock. She's got her skirts, and again, she's got this very sort of vibrantly coloured dress, but she's got her skirts kind of hitched up, so you can see her petticoats, you can see her bare legs, and because she is of Mediterranean extraction, Spanish in the film, Italian as an actual actress, she's got this sort of beautifully rich toned skin. She's got that sort of lovely sort of olive skin, and these, as I say, these bare legs. She isn't barefoot, but you could almost imagine her to be barefoot, and it's quite a shocking image, because all we've had really up until now, in terms of the women that we've had on screen, they've been very buttoned up, beautifully sort of coiffed hair, or they might have been more sort of like city women, but this is she's like a wild woman of the moors almost, isn't she?
She is. She's a child of nature, isn't she? There's something almost witchy about her, somewhat witch-like about her, and part of that, I suspect, would have been down to the fact that she's a foreigner. This was the late 50s after all, but also I think the fact that they wanted that contrast between the sort of more straight-laced Sir Henry, who, he's not as bad as his predecessors, but he's still an English gentleman, and so is Holmes and so is Watson, so they're very, proper. And she's just this sort of force of nature, which you could get from being a Mediterranean woman. And so, I think there's a little bit of that. Is we're going to have a kind of wild woman amongst us who can't be tamed by these men. And, as she goes through it, she manipulates the men brilliantly, I think. She throws everybody off the track, and she almost gets away with it, let's be honest. And she's a very smart character, very clever character, a little bit insane, to be fair. But, you're just a bit, But I think it's really clever the way they sort of contrast her with Mrs. Barrowman, who obviously is an older woman, but very domesticated. and very much the kind of a woman we expect from a costume drama, all buttoned up and very prim, very proper.
That's right.
And with the poor girl at the beginning, the servant girl, played by Judy Moyens.
Oh, my God. I mean, this is what I want to talk about in terms of the exploitation of women. So we'll come on to talk a little bit more about further themes of the film in terms of the sort of, the sort of eat the rich aspects of the story. But really specifically, you know, that poor, as you say, peasant woman or peasant girl. I mean, she's young.
She's a kid, isn't she? Yeah.
At the start of the film, who has been essentially kidnapped by Sir Hugo and locked in his house, and God knows what he's already been doing with her, but we absolutely know what designs he has on her. The, you know, possibly kind of the rest of the hunting party as well.
Well, he's prepared to just give her over to him.
Honestly.
As if she's a bit of property to be used by these men.
It is horrendous. And you know, her dad is up there trying to get her to safety, essentially, get her back out of the hands of this monster. And because of the power and arrogance and, you know, just downright evil of this horrible aristocratic man, he is mocking and attacking. You know, he throws the man out of the window and then burns him on the fire, and he's beating him up, and they're all stood around and laughing at him while they've got, you know, this girl locked in a room. And then she manages to escape. She shimmies down the vines outside the window.
That's right.
And the absolute sort of seething rage that then comes out of Sir Hugo. He calls her the bitch has got away, loose the pack.
That's right.
You know, he basically sets the dogs on her, and even the other men in the hunting party are a bit like, all right, Hugo, like, calm down.
A bit taken aback at that point. Yeah. We've gone too far now. You know, sort of a bit of forcing ourselves on this young girl. He's not one. You know, he's one thing, but hunting her down, oh no, it's beyond the pale. That is.
Yeah,
you know,
I know.
So they're just as bad, to be fair. They're Roggins as well, but he's a horrible man, isn't he?
I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. And then obviously this is what sort of kicks off this idea of the curse. He says something like, may the hounds of hell take me if I can't hunt her down. And of course he then chases her, hunts her across the moors. The beagles get scared of a howl, which you assume is from, you know, the hound, capital T, capital H.
Yep.
And so he is sort of left to just hunt her down himself, and he does, and he stabs her to death with this sort of very elaborate knife, and you see it covered in blood, and there is this incredible shot, which I think was my favourite shot from the whole film, of the bloody dagger just being left at the foot of the kind of stone that he's pushed her over on, and you can't see her, but you can just see her skirts just kind of hanging down, because she's obviously sort of laid back dead, and then this bloody dagger kind of on the ground at her feet. I mean, it is just monstrous.
It is. And I think we need to give a quick shout out to David Oxley, who's playing Sir Hugo so well that I wouldn't want to have met David Oxley. I'm sure he was a lovely guy, but he plays him so well. He's kind of a scary guy.
He's really scary.
He's a horrible misogynist, and I've recently come to think of that little cadre of horrible men as being like the equivalent of something like the Bullingdon Club or something.
Right.
These incredibly...
Oh my God, 100%.
Yeah, incredibly entitled rich men who just think they can do whatever they want to whoever they want to.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It is genuinely horrible. Is he the most sadistic character we've seen in a Hammer Gothic so far?
I think he is, because I think especially considering actually at the heart of this there is no supernatural element to it whatsoever.
That's right.
It's not even science fiction. You know, there isn't like this is a film that is ostensibly set just in the kind of the real natural world that we know, right? And so, yes, I think so, because even with Baron Frankenstein and him killing Justine, we know that she's carrying his child at the time, the marmalade the next day. Like, obviously, he is absolutely monstrous. But because there is that element of science fiction and kind of fantasy about that whole world, you can kind of read... You read his character kind of within that context.
That's right.
But here, Sir Hugo is just an evil man.
I sort of get the impression that maybe literally the thrill of the hunt and killing the poor girl turns him on more than anything else he may have been doing to her.
Was almost the kind of point of it all along.
Exactly, yeah. He was always going to do this. It was just going to be done in his own time. He was going to kill her at some point, but she just gets away and hastens it. But I think, this was his ultimate act of self-satisfaction, basically. Yeah. And he is one of the most repulsive figures in any Hammer film, I think. I'm not saying something because we're going to meet some horrible people as we go through this, but honestly, these characters...
But you're right, David Oxley he really sells it, because as we've said before, it's like you sort of think to yourself, I hate this character. It's like, well, I hate him because the performer is so good that they're making me hate him.
He's got this sort of towering temper on him, hasn't he? This sort of like rage, this unconscionable rage that this mere woman has managed to elude him, and managed to sort of get one over on him. And the red mist descends in a way that the red mist has never descended on anybody else, I don't think. He's so angry because this mere woman who is my property to do with as I will.
Exactly. And then, as we say, there's this kind of this aristocratic entitlement that kind of then trickles down through the generations. So you get Stapleton, who is he's essentially an illegitimate son that has kind of come out of the line. And so this is where this kind of eat the rich revenge plot essentially comes from, that he sees himself as the rightful kind of heir to Sir Hugo, to Sir Henry's seat. Yes. And they're basically killing off each of the actual lords to make sure that is the idea ultimately for these guys for Stapleton and Cecile to kind of inherit the land and the house and that kind of thing? I
think it's as simple as that. They haven't got any big designs on becoming the lord and lady of the manor. They just want the house and all the riches that go with it. They're quite sort of quite venal characters, really. And, but this idea that the aristocracy are the real monsters, he runs right through Hammer. We're going to see it time again. We've already seen it. We've already seen Dracula as this aristocratic presence lurking in his castle, emerging every so often to prey on the working class.
Absolutely.
As they weren't working class back then, but you know what I mean, on the ordinary people. Frankenstein, particularly in Revenge of Frankenstein, he has a whole hospital full of...
Yes, that's what I was going to say, absolutely. His sort of use of all the people in the hospital, and again, this idea of just property,
Yes, exactly. And we're going to see this a lot. And this, the script was the work of a guy called Peter Bryan, who had been a camera operator, in fact, and became a scriptwriter. For Hammer, for other people as well, but for Hammer, he became, I believe this is his first script. And he'd go on to write Plague of the Zombies, among other things. Now, that is another film. It's a terrific film. Can't wait to get to talk about that one. But that's also got that kind of aristocracy feeding on the workers thing. We're going to see it a lot. We'll see it in, sort of Kiss of the Vampire. We'll see it in all of these films. They've all got all the Hammer, the Dracula films, all the Frankenstein films. Have all got that thing that the aristocracy are not to be trusted.
Yeah.
Let's stop tugging the forelock and let's start questioning what they're really up to. So these films are actually, in that sense, quite subversive and quite daring for the time. Nowadays we're always questioning posh people.
Yeah.
Quite rightly so, because we all know they're the best bloody idiots, at worst completely dangerous. But in the 1950s, everybody was still terribly deferential. And so to be able to do this sort of thing in plain sight without getting the ire of the critics and the BBFC. They had enough to worry about, perhaps, with what was going on in these films. But I think they were very, very clever, Hammer, to be able to make these almost social points in these films without them being too overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't, it feels subtle in the way that it's just kind of intrinsically part of this story. It doesn't feel like a film with a message,
yes.
That it's kind of beating you over the head with it.
No.
But at the same time, it's so well written that it's also kind of impossible to ignore it. I thought it was great.
Absolutely. Was it Louis B. Mayer or one of the big studio heads in America once told a writer, if you want to send a message, use Western Union, not my films. And up to a point, I kind of get that. What I like is when a film delivers me a message that I don't immediately notice. Mm-hmm. Maybe I don't get it till the second time. Maybe I don't get it until the last act of the film. If you're there grandstanding and beating me over the head, here's the point, look, sort of believe this is what I'm telling you. It puts me right off. Because I like to be able to see it for myself. And I think Hammer were doing that. But among the many clever, brilliant things they did, they understood that audiences didn't want to be lectured at, but they wanted some intellectual stimulation as well, perhaps.
Right, exactly.
So let's give them the best of both worlds. Let's put that in there for the people who can or want to see it, but it's not going to be so upfront that it overwhelms the rest of the story.
And, we've been seeing that right from the beginning of these films that we've been talking about. You get that in the Quatermass films, you get it in X the Unknown even, then obviously it was much more about kind of things like the nuclear threat and, science kind of getting ahead of itself and actually what is science, what is scientists' responsibility and, as these ideas kind of start to run away from them. We've been watching hugely entertaining films that have got an intellectual bent to them right from the start of this podcast. So
right from the start, question everything seems to be the key word for these Hammer films. Just don't accept the status quo,
which I love, and I think that's something that I maybe wasn't expecting quite as much of at the start of this journey, and I'm really enjoying it.
But the beauty of it is, I can feel people bristling even as I speak, saying, that's not what I watch Hammer films for. That's great. That's absolutely fine, because Hammer,
absolutely fine,
like I said, was so clever that they could make the film that you wanted to watch for almost everybody.
Exactly.
It's uncanny talent that I don't think has ever been repeated in British cinema, certainly, of being able to make one film for multiple audiences.
I love that.
Really, really clever. We'll see a lot more of this as we go along, but food for thought for now.
Absolutely. Right, we need to come on to talk about the horror, Kev.
Can I just, before we do that, because that's very important, I'm just going to backtrack a few seconds.
Okay.
Because I want to give a shout out to John Le Mesurier.
Oh, Barrymore. I can't believe I missed him out.
Who, we all know and love him for his comedy work. For some of us of a certain vintage, he's always going to be the lovely Sergeant Wilson in Dad's Army. He was terrific. This was his only Hammer film. And I wish they'd used him more, because I think he's really good in this. Because we're so used to seeing him do comedy, it's unusual to see him doing a straight role.
He's so good as
he was a terrific straight actor.
As like a gothic, because he's sort of a butler, I suppose, right?
Yeah, he's the manservant.
The manservant, exactly.
Yeah.
He's so good in this. And you're right, as that kind of straight character, like he's just a delight. Like I love it when he's on screen, and I'm really sad to hear that this is his only one, because I got really excited. I was like, my God, I didn't realise that John Mesurier was in these films.
But no, only the one time. Thankfully, he was only credited as John Le Mesurier. His real name was John Charles Elson Le Mesurier de Sommeris Hallilay. They would have needed 2 credit cards at the beginning of the film to get his name on, wouldn't they? Madness. But he's terrific.
Jack to his friends.
And I just wanted to point out that Judy Moyens, who plays that poor girl at the beginning, the servant girl.
Yeah, go on.
She came back for one more Hammer film, The Pirates of Blood River. Later in life, she became Lady Dashwood. And the mausoleum of the Dashwood estate, we're going to see that again, into The Devil a Daughter in 1976.
Ooh.
one of the last films, I think maybe the last film we're covering for this series. So she's here right at the start, and in a sense, she's going to be there right at the end as well.
Love that.
Couple of little bits and pieces. John Le Mesurier, I couldn't let that go by without a mention.
Honestly, he's in my notes. I can't believe that I almost
There's so much to talk about this film. There really is. It's extraordinary.
Well, it was a genuine pleasure to see him on screen, as I say. He's
lovely. He's lovely.
Drink him in while you can, because this is the only time we're going to see him.
The only Hammer film he's in. Yeah.
Cool. May I move on to the horror?
Oh, if you must.
Let's do it.
Must.
So there is, this is stuff that we've been talking about throughout, really, Kev, with the sort of graphic violence and real sort of cruelty that's going on in this film. But we've got lots of lovely Kensington gore, obviously, and we have one very prominent, very large, very hairy spider that you're telling me wasn't in the book.
Not in the book.
But
no,
it has a real part to play in this film.
Well, the first thing to address is, it's quite a graphic version of the Hound compared to others, yet curiously, the BBFC only awarded it an A certificate. Meaning kids could see it.
What?
Accompanied by adults, but they could see it. That must have come as a real shock and a bit of a disappointment to Hammer, who, of course, had been playing on the X certificate since the Quatermass experiment. Yeah, so that must have been a bit of a surprise to them. I wonder if maybe it's because there's not so much emphasis on the sex in this film.
Sure, yeah, I suppose.
Yes, we get Marla Landy showing her petticoat and we get the opening sequence, but there's not the sort of hot and heavy stuff that we got in Dracula.
No, and it's not sort of there's a bit of smooching between Cecile and Henry on the moor, but that's it, isn't it, really? Everything else...
That's the bit that, sort of the kids that could now go and see it would have just been sitting there going, "Oh, why are they kissing?"
Yeah,
they wouldn't have been bothered by it at all. Boring. Let's get the dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what we all go through. We all do that phase. They're kissing.
It always reminds me of The Princess Bride with with the kid who's like, "Oh no, not more kissing."
Yeah. We all go through that phase. I don't like girls. They're smelly. I don't like boys. They're horrible. And then
Ew, boys, throw rocks at them.
And then 2 minutes later, we lock eyes with that girl or boy in the class at school, and that's it. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my God,
I can't think about anything else.
Exactly, you can't sleep, you can't eat. It's just ridiculous. The joys of being young. I would never go back to it, honestly. But yeah, I wonder if it's because there wasn't that sort of explicit emphasis on sex that the board were probably a little bit surprised that Hammer didn't do that and so overlooked the goriness of it. Like you say, that opening scene with the knife is really quite nasty.
I mean, I found that just that whole sequence I found really shocking. But I wonder if that's, watching it from an adult's point of view. I suppose for a younger viewer, they wouldn't have necessarily noticed or understood kind of the deeper horrors that are going on there.
Well, I think that's key to a lot of these arguments, isn't it? That, do children actually understand what they're seeing on screen? I can remember many years ago living in a shared house. I had a room with a family and they had a couple of kids, and the little boy, who was about 3, hid in my room a lot. He used to hide and then jump out and try and make me jump. And I got my mate come round one night. We were watching City of the Living Dead, the Lucio Fulci film, and this little boy was hiding in the bedroom, and he'd obviously been sort of put off a little bit by the fact that I got my mate with me. Yeah. But eventually he worked up the courage, leapt out, went, ha, like that, just as one of the gore scene comes on. And he sort of looked at the television and went, ugh, monsters, and ran off. Didn't bother him in the slightest bit because he didn't understand what was going on. He said,
didn't
monsters.
Understand that Lucio Fulci is one of the most, disgusting, graphic, gory...
Exactly. Kids are much more resilient. I would not show a Hammer film to a child, but if they happen to catch one, I don't think I'd be too worried about them.
Exactly,
so, yeah. But yeah, that's amazing that it got away with an A certificate, I think. We have a new name here that we need to thank for some of this. Roy Ashton. Roy Ashton had been the assistant to Phil Leakey.
Okay.
And Leakey, of course, had done all those terrific makeups on, the Frankenstein monster and the Quatermass films and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And he'd had a retainer with Hammer. And Hammer decided that they weren't going to renew that retainer, that they'd just have him as a freelancer. And he didn't like that, so he packed his bags and went off his own way and became a freelancer anyway, but didn't work for Hammer again.
Okay.
And because Ashton was his assistant, Hammer didn't have to look far. They said, Roy, we need you to do this. And he becomes their makeup and effects guy for quite some while after this. And this is kind of a baptism of fire for him, I think, because he has to do the gory knife scene. He has to do the Hound, which we'll talk about in a moment. But
there's the kind of webbing, isn't there, on Stapleton's hand, which I thought was very good.
Yeah, exactly. That's very effective, that scene. So
yeah.
He gets a sort of baptism of fire, but he was no newcomer. He'd been assisting Phil Leakey. He'd been watching one of the best at very close quarters. And so he learned a lot and put it all to good use here.
But the tarantula is very real, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's a little bit too real for Christopher Lee, I gather. Apparently, Christopher Lee was not fond of spiders. I don't know whether he was full-on arachnophobic or whether he was just like most of us, just, didn't mind them if they were over there, but I don't want them on me, thank you very much.
Well, no, and especially when they're the size of your hand.
Oh, it's a big old bugger, isn't it? I mean, it's an absolute brute of a spider. Massive. And apparently the cast and crew were all on edge that day. Surprise, surprise, because they didn't want this thing getting loose and then hiding somewhere in Bray and having to hunt for it, leaping out at them and all the rest of it. But yeah, so Christopher Lee, I'm not entirely sure was called on to act very much that day. I think it was like, I don't like this thing crawling on my shoulder.
Well,
but the spider itself, it's not in the book.
Right, okay.
It's an odd addition, really, because it doesn't make a great deal of sense. They've stolen one of the shoes to get the scent for the Hound. So why have they put the spider in the other boot to kill him? What were they thinking? Did they expect one of their plans not to work, so let's have a plan B?
I know.
Because they don't try any other way of killing him. And I think the simple fact is that Peter Bryan thought, I'm writing a Hammer film, we better have a tarantula in it. And so I think it was quite as simple as that, And it's a very good scene, Lee's
It's really good. There's this brilliant moment where Sherlock is, sort of jumps to action and he's got his cane and he's going to sort of knock it off of Sir Henry's shoulder.
Yeah.
And he says, just move your head very slowly and sort of between his teeth. And this is where I think Christopher Lee may have not been acting. He goes, I can't.
Yes. It's so good seeing Christopher Lee playing vulnerable.
Yeah.
The range of that man was staggering, and here he is playing. And I think that's the point where we warm to Sir Henry, because he's human after all. He's not this sort of aristocratic monster. He is just a human being.
Yeah.
And he's as scared of that spider, probably more so, than we are. And I kind of like that. And it's a terrific little moment. And the bit where sort of they're talking right at the start, and then just sort of Peter Cushing's eyes widen almost imperceptibly, and he says, "Don't move." Mm-hmm. And you think, what's going on? Beautifully directed, because you can't see as an audience what Sherlock Holmes is seeing at that moment.
That's right.
And then when the camera turns around, it pans slowly down, and there's this tarantula crawling up his arm. I'm not particularly arachnophobic. I think it's fairly well known that mice and rodents, they're my great fear in life. Spiders, I don't mind spiders. They're all right. But even I get the collie wobbles watching that scene. It's quite nasty.
Absolutely. So about the more famous and central animal in this film,
yes.
we get the Hound, and for the vast majority of the film, as I understand it, the book and also other adaptations, you don't see it obviously because that's the point, right? You sort of hear the howls out on the moors, and you see maybe some victims of the Hound, or you hear about victims of the Hound. But you don't actually see him until right at the end. And what we get here is this huge, great big dog who is a sort of Great Dane or a Mastiff or something. He's one of these enormous breeds. But they've put a little mask on him to make him look more scary.
He was a Great Dane. by the name.
Oh, he's a Great Dane. Okay.
His name was Colonel. And apparently he was a very friendly little chap. I say little. He was a very friendly chap and immediately took to the cast and crew and they to him. So much so that he wasn't particularly scary. and so they came up with this idea, let's put a mask on him, just try and make him a little bit scarier, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And the mask was made by a woman called Margaret Carter, who would go on to marry this film's art director, Bernard Robinson. So, there was a bit of a happy ending there for that.
That's nice, a bit of Hammer romance.
A bit of Hammer romance. But Colonel wasn't really, he was soppy as a sack, was Colonel. He was just, like most dogs, he just wanted a bit of a cuddle and a treat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't want to attack people. And when they've tried to film the climactic attack on Sir Henry, Colonel would just jump up and start licking Lee's face.
Yeah.
Licked to death by the Hound of the Baskervilles. He's not quite the image that Hamill
lacks a bit of the horror we're looking for, doesn't it?
It does. So what they had to do, and it sounds a bit cruel, but it wasn't really, they found that the sound of crinkling paper used to annoy Colonel. So they used to crinkle some paper next to him off camera just to get him a bit sort of wound up and overexcited and let him loose. But it still wasn't that effective. And what we see in the film is a sort of composite of various shots where, you get like 13 frames of Colonel being a bit vicious before he collapses in a heap and just wants his tummy rubbed. And then, sort of 20 frames over it. And they have to edit it together out of composite parts.
Amazing.
They did try, and I thought this was absolutely hilarious, they did try to make it a bit scarier. They got given an extra week by head office, by James Carreras, to go back and try shooting the scene again with a young boy in a replica of Sir Henry's costume.
Oh, my God.
So that he would look,
smaller.
Look the part.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Colonel just got overexcited and charged the boy. The boy dodged out of the way. He went crashing into the stagehands and everybody behind the camera. So it didn't quite work out. And they abandoned it. They never bothered with it. But that is a very important point, that this hound is meant to be gigantic, and the prop one that plays the dead one is actually bigger than Colonel.
Yeah.
It is very noticeably bigger. The problem is, of course, that when you're up against 6'4" Christopher Lee, a Great Dane's going to look like a Chihuahua.
Right.
So, they had that added problem that they just couldn't get it to look right. But I think this is very true of all adaptations of Hound of the Baskervilles. It's very difficult to make even the biggest dog look that scary on film.
Yeah.
There were a whole slew of dog-related horror films in the 70s, and they were never terribly scary, because you just knew as soon as someone shouted cut, they'd be looking for their ball and going having a chase around the fields and having a play, Well,
because the trouble is when dogs are meant to be scary, because actually they're just lovable things that are having quite a nice time on set, their tails are always wagging.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So they never look particularly horrifying at all. When you see a dog that's genuinely upset and angry, they are scary.
Yeah.
When their ears go down, the tail goes between their legs, that could be quite scary. Never really happens because everybody looks after them on the set, and because Colonel was so lovely,
they're too well looked after.
It's like, it's it doesn't quite work, but then your imagination fills in the gaps.
Absolutely.
And Colonel will always be a star to me.
Oh, Colonel.
The first shot of him is actually very effective when you hear the growl and Holmes looks up and there he is standing on the crag.
Absolutely.
And he's like snarling at him. That's very effective. That is really good. So, fair play to him. He puts in a good performance there.
Oh.
So, Hammer's unsung hero, Colonel.
Oh, Colonel. So, obviously, all of the kind of shenanigans are revealed, and our bad guys and gals both get their comeuppance. Poor Cecile, we were talking about her earlier as this sort of wild woman of the moors, and she meets a very sticky end.
Oh, yes.
Almost literally by being sort of sucked down into the bog, which feels quite fitting in some ways.
It does, doesn't it? Because, she is, like you say, she's this wild woman. She's, in tune with the environment, and it's the environment that kills her in the end.
Yeah.
So, and, the very mire, in fact, that started the curse now ends it.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a nice cyclical moment in a way.
It is, yeah, it's good. And then you just sort of go back to Holmes and Watson back at Baker Street, I can only assume.
Yes.
And they have the film basically ends with them getting receipt of a portrait from Sir Henry. So part of the mystery is that there has been this missing portrait in the Baskerville house.
That's right, yes.
And this has been taken because it shows Sir Hugo's webbed hand, which obviously then goes down the line to Stapleton, and so they have to steal that painting so nobody kind of makes that link too obviously.
Sure.
And Holmes and Watson, how lucky they get this portrait of one of the most hideous men that we have come across yet.
Yes.
With a webbed hand, and this is apparently a fitting gift. But they sort of talk about the fact, or Sir Henry talks about the fact in his letter that Holmes sort of collects, I guess, souvenirs, doesn't he? Sort of from each of his cases. So this is his souvenir.
Yes.
And he also gets, or they get, a very generous cheque. So once again, just underlining the fact that Sir Henry is a pretty decent bloke when it comes to aristocrats, because at least he pays for services rendered.
He did, and in fact, Holmes makes a reference early on that he has a flat rate for his work.
He does, that's
unless
right.
he chooses. Yeah, unless he chooses to not take money at all. So the fact that Sir Henry volunteers to pay extra, top marks. I think the aristo in him comes out by sending him that painting where he's somewhat out of touch with what people are thinking. But fair play to the man. He puts his money where his mouth is and signs a cheque and gives him something extra. And I love Peter Cushing's little reaction when he looks at it and goes, oh, very generous.
Yeah, I know. And then just sort of slides it into his inside pocket, I think.
That's right, yeah. Right, that's going down the bank in the morning.
Brilliant. So any favourite moments from the film that we haven't chatted about yet?
Just Peter Cushing dashing about everywhere, looking cool as ever. I mean, he's very energetic in this film again. Holmes silhouetted against the twilight on the crag. It's a lovely shot.
Oh my God, that is so cool.
And the whole sequence where Holmes is interviewing Dr. Mortimer at the beginning with all the props play and all the brilliant interaction between these three extraordinary actors. Just a little masterclass in how to do that particular scene, which is in every Hound and virtually every Sherlock Holmes film, isn't it? But this is a masterclass on how it should be done.
There's an incredible line because they go down into the mines and Holmes is figuring stuff out about the Hound. He finds an old beef bone and that kind of thing. And there is a cave-in. They're digging for a couple of days, I think, and they can't find him. And then they sort of look very dejected and they go back to the wagon and he's sat there looking very smug and but a little exhausted. And his line delivery is so good because they're all sort of excited to see him. And he says, when the general applause has died down, I wonder if we could get back to the hall. Yes. I've hurt my leg, I'm cold and I'm hungry. It's so good.
Terrific. I'd forgotten that, but you're right, that is brilliant.
Absolutely is. And his kind of posture on the car, and I like to think to myself that he's probably been there about an hour.
Yes.
But he's just been biding his time. He's like, I could call out to them, but no, it's going to have a far higher impact if I wait for them.
It's going to be funnier if I put them through it first.
Exactly.
And I think you get a little glimpse there as well of how much Holmes and Watson mean to each other.
Yeah, I know.
When Watson is so pleased that he's still alive. Because he'd started to come to terms with the fact that he may be dead in that mine. And then when he sees him, he's like, Holmes, he's like, lovely little moment. Brilliant performances.
It is really lovely.
So good.
Yeah, it's so good. So I think we can both say that we're fans of this film. What did other people think?
Well, it didn't do quite as well at the box office as its predecessors, but it did okay. It did fine. I mean, Hammer were virtually bomb-proof at this point. I think part of the problem was that they were advertising it in the UK on the posters as Sherlock Holmes' most terrifying adventure. And in the States, they got this tagline, "It's 10 times the terror in Technicolor, the most horror-dripping tale ever written." And I think people went along expecting to see more of Frankenstein and Dracula. And that's not what they got. They got a story that they were probably very used to. They probably read at school. And it may have seemed, I don't know, slightly disappointing. Not for me, I have to say. I loved it the first moment I saw it. But it just didn't do quite as well as its predecessors. Not by any means a flop. It still did so. Like I say, Hammer at this point could just announce a title and start banking the money because, they were just so on a roll. And the critics, we're going to get bored of talking about the bloody critics because they were divided, although the consensus was that Cushing was excellent, quite rightly. Colonel didn't impress them very much, though, so we don't listen to them. No, go away, critics, we don't like you. But yeah, we're going to get used to that. As time goes on, I shall probably mention the critics less and less. There's one film I will talk about in some detail, but I think we just have to take it as read that the critics never liked Hammer.
Yeah,
the public loved them. We loved them, the critics didn't, and that great divide between the critic and the audience, it's never been more pronounced than with Hammer, I suspect.
Yeah. Well, as both a critic and an audience member, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was great.
Excellent.
It doesn't quite reach my elites, but it's definitely in the uppers. Absolutely.
I'm with you 100%. Not quite elite. Not quite. I don't know why. I do love it, but it doesn't quite. If you watch this on a double bill with Dracula.
Yeah, I think that's
it's very clear which one is the better film.
Yeah.
But it is very much an upper tier film. I mean, just don't get me wrong. These are all sliding scales, so please don't come at me on social media and say, no, you didn't like this film. Yes, I do. I love this film. It's just not as good as Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein. But, that's all it is. So,
I mean, this is genuinely one that I could see myself easily just popping on.
Oh, yes.
Again, yeah. Sort of not for something, but just to watch it as a film on, a Saturday afternoon or something. I could absolutely see myself revisiting this one. So, yeah. In
terms of rewatchability, it's right up there. It really is.
Great.
It's so rewatchable. In fact, I might even rewatch it again on Boxing Day because that feels like a good day to be watching a Sherlock Holmes horror film, doesn't it? Oh, my God,
Kev, it's a perfect Boxing Day movie.
Isn't it a perfect Boxing Day movie?
This and one of the Ray Harryhausens,
yes.
Please.
You're stuffed full of food. You're fed up of your relatives. Yeah. Let's put on the Hound and the Baskervilles.
Exactly. And this is why it needs to be something that you've seen half a dozen times, because then you can snooze your way through it.
Exactly right.
Not because it's boring, but just because you're full of turkey.
Because it's Boxing Day and yes, just the way it is. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Hammer Time. We'll be back next week raiding ancient Egyptian tombs and facing another Christopher Lee monster in 1959's The Mummy. To check out the full list of movies we'll be covering throughout this podcast, head to evolutionofhorror.com/hammer. We'd love to hear from you, so please do send us any questions or comments for upcoming mailbag episodes. Drop us an email to hammer@evolutionofhorror.com. You can follow the Evolution of Horror Network on Instagram at EOH_network. You can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky at Bunny Darke. And Kev, where can people find you?
Instagram, Facebook and Twitter under EOFFTV. I have to say at this point, if I may, just as a personal thing, say thank you so much to everybody who's been very supportive of all of this and has been coming along and joining us on social media. It's been really heartening having some chats with people who have seen these films for the first time. So please keep that coming. Please do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely second that. It's been such a pleasure just getting everybody's feedback, so thank you. Keep it coming. We love hearing from you, and it just makes all of this all the more enjoyable knowing that there's people out there kind of enjoying it along with us. So keep letting us know. And speaking of of mailbags, I think we've got maybe one or 2 more episodes after this, Kevin. Then we're doing our Christmas mailbag. So
yes,
bear that in mind, listeners.
Get those questions in. Yes.
Get those questions in.
If anybody wants to ask the question, what the bloody hell is Lyons talking about, you're very welcome to do so. I may not answer it.
Yeah,
but,
it's rhetorical.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's rhetorical.
There's another way that you can support us as well. You can rate and review us on your podcast app of choice, so don't forget to do that. Thank you for listening, and join us next week for another episode of Hammer Time.